We got blood everywhere.
Okay, how old is he?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, is every... Okay.
Explosion in the house and people are injured in here.
The challenges that public safety people face these days it's pretty cumbersome, and we've really reached critical mass. We have an incredible problem with violence, with drug abuse and use, and we are seeing more and more first responders who are suffering simply because they're exposed to human suffering and violence and chaos over and over again.
There's going to be 2 patients. We cannot make entry at this time because there's another package that's sent to home. We do have 2 patients here.
Medic 4 that's received 2 patients unable to make contact. Another package in the home.
New studies that do exist suggest the problem is more widespread than even some suffering will admit.
He was deemed unfit for duty due to post-traumatic stress.
And doctors say it is a real problem in the police force.
So they tend to carry on heroically doing this really important job without recognising that they're becoming worn down by it.
We're starting to see an epidemic, and it used to be, you have to be strong-minded, asking for help is for the weak. But with all the problems arising, it's becoming really bad. And officers are just overwhelmed, burnout, and they give up on life.
Because I kept wanting to see if I could just deal with it myself, and because it's what we do. It's what we've always done. And
apparently, people were concerned enough that they thought that I might take my own life.
And I remember walking up to you and opening my mouth and seeing the look on your face and just bursting into tears and gasping out, "I need help."
My name is Tania Glenn, and I'm a clinician based in Austin, Texas. I actually began my career 27 years ago, and I have dedicated my life to treating first responders and veterans, and especially focusing on trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Glenn, who was assisted with traumatic events spanning from the Oklahoma City bombing to Dallas when 5 officers were gunned down, estimates 40 to 50% of first responders suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Their job is to walk into people's lives on the absolute worst days of their lives. And so every single call, every single shift is one more risk of putting a first responder into a situation that is essentially beyond their human coping capacity, which is the actual precursor for post-traumatic stress disorder. Our first responders are being exposed to things that they would have never guessed that they would see or hear or smell or deal with.
My name is Bob Luddy. I'm 42 years old. I've been a paramedic for, at this point, 23 years. Most people walk the planet and they don't know if they've made a difference. Every EMS professional out there that's been doing this any length of time can say not only I've saved a person, we've done it in spades. There's a lot of people that are still here, that are still walking around healthy, they're still alive, because of my 23 years doing this job. That's the best part of it.
My name is Mona Galvan. I was born and raised in Texas. I grew up in Pflugerville, and then my dad came from the military, so I always admired that. Once I got out of high school, I decided to enlist, and I joined the Texas National Guard and became a 74 Delta Chemical. In July of 2014, I was hired by Williamson County as a corrections officer. And I've been there going on 5 years.
So my name is Ryan Blake. I'm a firefighter with a small fire department in Central Texas. your average Joe doesn't see some of the things that we see, and that's part of our job, and that's part of what makes it great, and one of the things that kind of sucks about it as well.
My name is Michelle Kelly, and I am a mom of 2 amazing children. They are 7 and 11. I used to work a full-time job as a juvenile probation officer, but then in 2015, my husband, Detective Sergeant Chris Kelly, was killed in the line of duty.
Nick and I started dating in August, so I had training for 2 weeks in the Army, and he adapted to that schedule. I was in the field, I could only talk maybe like at 4 in the morning, and he would answer the phone call, and just so supportive. And you know, he was like, I can't wait for you to come back. And on my birthday, he stayed up till midnight to sing me happy birthday while I was in the field. And so that was, you know, super sweet. And he made me feel really good about myself, and he showed me a love that I've never experienced. Nick had mentioned that he had anger, but he was like, oh, I got over it, you know, anger is not the way of life. And I've never seen it, never saw it, never, he never exhibited anything to me. If anything, he'd be like, you know, life's about being good, and you know, you can't waste time on being upset and happy. So I never would have expected that he had anything wrong. He was just so happy with life. I started getting ready for work again. I didn't know anything. I got to work. I was running late. It was like I had to be in by midnight, so it was like 11:45. I was pushing being late. And when I got there, you know, my supervisor's out there, and I was like, oh, hey, what's up? And I'm buttoning up my shirt, and he goes, you're not working today. What's going on? He's like, you're not working tonight. And I was like, what did I do? Like, please tell me what I did. Like, what did I do that was so wrong? And he was like, I need your keys. And I was like, I'm not giving them up. And he's like, I need your keys. And so I threw my keys, and I was like, there. And he goes, Nick shot himself. He had texted me, I love you, and to be told that he shot himself was not realistic. It wasn't, I couldn't accept it. I just was like, no, this is a bad dream. This is a bad dream, and I'm gonna wake up from it. He's gonna walk through this door with flowers, and you know, it's a bad dream. But it wasn't a bad dream, it was reality.
At the time, my children were 4 and 7, and that basically was the worst day of our life. We kissed him goodbye, just like we always did. We told him we loved him. We told him to be safe. And then we went on our way. I dropped the kids off at camp, and I went to work. I actually found out from a friend that something was happening before I was notified. I was in a meeting, so I wasn't actually even supposed to be looking at my phone, but I just happened to see this text, and she said, something's happening in Hutto. There's a ton of officers, like everywhere. There's tons of sirens. Do you know what's happening? At this time, my boss came to get me. It was across the building, and I still didn't know anything was happening. I thought it was something completely unrelatable because my boss told me earlier that he may pull me from the meeting to talk about something. He had me enter his office first, and as I turn around to look for him, because I entered first, the chief of police was there from Hutto, Chief Morrison, and it's like I just knew. Just thinking to myself and crying out to God, like, how is this true? How is this happening? What am I gonna tell my kids? They were on a field trip, so I couldn't go and pick them up. I had to wait several hours before I could even have them in my arms, which was terrible.
And so I just remember thinking that things will never be the same.
My name is Jason Bristow. I started my law enforcement career in Laredo, Texas with a federal law enforcement agency. I was there from November 2007 to December 2012. In 2012, I resigned from that federal law enforcement agency and began employment with the Central Texas Police Department. The early days here happened fast. I kind of picked up here where I left off in the federal law enforcement agency. It just kind of seemed to follow me around. Day 8 of my first phase, I was with my FTO, and it was a suicide call in which the husband and wife had been arguing for almost 14 years, and he finally had enough of it, of the relationship, and he went to the car and he shot himself in the head in the car. The wife walked their young children past the dad and said, "Look at your dad, he's still faking, look like he's sleeping in the car." Came back home from dropping the kids off to school and realized he wasn't faking and that he did shoot himself in the head, and my FTO and I were the first ones on that call. My FTO related very much, I believe, to that family, and I believe he was probably the foreshadowing of what I was going to endure, because he turned white as a ghost. He just looked flush, and I didn't really know him that well. And I took over the scene, and I just told him, you stand here and I'll control this crime scene until somebody else who knows what they're doing gets over here. I just knew, don't touch anything. But it was a very emotional scene that I recall very vividly.
One particular call that was it was about a year ago, that kind of triggered some of, maybe I'd been snowballing a little bit, and then it kind of pushed the snowball a little bit more, and it picked up momentum and started to get bigger. Just the way that the call happened made it a little interesting too. It was just like that. We were driving down the street, and then we're doing CPR on somebody's child. The patient didn't survive. They pronounced at the hospital, and it was a difficult call. And I think, we have those types of calls all the time where, it's a kid or a young person. That was the first one where it was, more hands-on, and everything was a little more personal. Whenever we cleared and we were going back in service, we kind of had a hot wash. Everybody good? Are you okay? And of course, you're still almost running just on adrenaline. And at that point, it's like, yeah, we're good, right? Everybody's fine. And even if everybody wasn't fine, they're not gonna say that right on scene. They're not gonna, break down and start talking about their feelings standing in the front yard of these people's house that, just watch their little kid get transported with CPR still in progress.
I'm Katie Thornhill. I'm a communications dispatcher for a local metropolitan EMS system. I've been in 911 for a decade now. The challenges in dispatch is that I can't do it for anybody else. I have to give them the instructions and have them follow it. The way we look at it is we are directing the surgeon on how to do his surgery. So if we don't get it right, they're not going to get it right. So there's a lot of challenge in making sure that when you tell someone what to do, that it's clear, that it's easy for someone that doesn't speak medical, that doesn't speak, fancy words, to be able to follow. And then actually convincing someone that has absolutely lost their mind and is having their worst day that they can actually make a difference and make a change and save a life. I still think that my drowning in next door county was one of the hardest ones that I've ever done. It was for a little girl who had fallen into a family pool. They got her out, and where they are in their county was close enough to our county that the call came into our center. And we had to transfer it to a different department and let them take over. But that particular department doesn't give instructions. They're not allowed to give instructions. And knowing that there was a 2-year-old that needed help that wasn't going to get as much help as she should have was really hard. So I actually stayed on the phone and took over the offer, and I said, do you want me to take this? And they were like, yes, please, because we can't.
Is she breaking it off?
Bernie County, do you guys? I am. Do you want me to give instructions?
Yes, unresponsive.
If you want to, you can. I'm not allowed to.
Okay, I can do it. That's fine. Okay, so we do have the help on the way. I'm going to give you some instructions until they get there, okay?
We sent a medical helicopter.
Okay, Brooke, at your house there, is there an open area where we can land the helicopter? They need to go down the road.
I see it, yeah.
Is there? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let you go start. It'll be there in 5 minutes.
Are you sure?
Yes, they're already up in the air.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Bye.
And she did survive. Not as well as we would have hoped. She had to go to rehab. There was some neuro damage, but she survived. So she was a very lucky little girl. You go from saving a drowning 2-year-old to someone that's having toe pain because it's Friday night and they can't get into their doctor, so they call us. And in this field, we're so busy taking care of everybody else that if we don't take care of ourselves, it just multiplies and keeps going, and you either crash and burn or you figure it out.
The problem today is that a lot of leaders in police, fire, and EMS don't understand the importance of mental health. They feel like they don't have time. So what they do is they budget for high attrition rates, for people to quit, burn out, PTSD, whatever it is, they quit, and to replace them. It costs about $60,000 to put someone through a police academy or a fire academy at a minimum. And so when you save that, because you save your employees, you really can't even put a price on a paramedic who's very seasoned, who knows the city and knows the tempo and the population. When you get a new person, they know none of that. So when you're people who have been through trauma, when they don't get care and they quit, not only are you paying to hire a new person, which is thousands of dollars, you're losing the wisdom.
My name is Nick Baker. I started EMS 22 years ago when I graduated high school and went to the military. Sometimes you're going to see some of the worst and see that even more than any other medical professional is going to see. We had a call that came out as an unknown early in the morning. We drove to the call and we didn't get any extra details until we actually pulled up to the scene, and we were the first ones to arrive. And I got out with a cadet that I had, and when we got out, all of a sudden we got an update on our computer that told us that it was a bombing.
What parts of the body were burned or injured?
Yes, everybody. We got 2 people injured here, please.
Okay, what part of the body?
Hands, face. I don't know. I got blood all over my house.
Okay.
They opened a package and it exploded from outside.
There was a woman that kept running in and out of the house screaming for help. You could see some smoke kind of coming out of the house. As we walked up to the scene and tried to speak with her, she couldn't hear us because her eardrums were blown out. She had been inside when the bomb went off, and we could see a younger male laying on the floor, now moving.
She can't hear the package exploded.
Okay, then I need you to do it.
I have blood on the floor. I can't get through. All on my floor. Oh my God. I wonder who the... Here, somebody can put this on drive.
Fire department.
Okay.
Address of your emergency.
He was laying in a large pool of blood on the floor face down. He had fingers blown off of a hand. Another hand, the arm was completely disfigured. When I went to move him, you could feel the injuries of just how the shrapnel that went through him had just shredded his body inside. He had basically, from the blast injuries and then from the amount of blood he lost, he had no chance. He was gone immediately. I had multiple people ask me if I was okay multiple times, which I've been doing this in such a different way from military to being civilian EMS now that when I started EMS, you didn't talk about it. It was very well known you did not speak of if anything was wrong because that was bad.
A young woman, a teenager, had found a suicide note written by her brother. It was called 911, TCSO got out there, the deputy looked at the note. He had ultimately succeeded in his mission to take his life, but he failed in his plan. It looks like he drilled the holes in the bucket too big and put too much weight in it, and when he threw it in the water, it filled up too quickly and it pulled him in before he could pull the trigger. The thing that struck me immediately was this deep purplish blue color to his face from the lividity and the water temperature, and a look of just horror was frozen on his face. He died alone underwater, struggling to get the knot untied from his waist. He tried to change his mind, but it was too late. And unzipping the body bag and seeing that look of horror and that color just seared itself into my brain.
What we explain to first responders all the time is, it's normal for after a bad call for you to have like a lot of images, sight, smells, sounds running through your mind for a couple of days. And then those calls that are processed successfully, they start to fade. What happens with trauma though is that call really rocks your world and it stays. And we notice that 7 days out, you haven't returned back to normal, and 14 days out, you're still thinking about it, you hear it, you smell it, you taste it. And sometimes that causes a lot of anxiety about returning to work. A lot of folks really start to, they have adrenaline rushes as they're putting on their uniform, they kind of get sweaty, they get to work, they're really irritated. And this is kind of the distant early warning that there's an issue with a call or a series of events. As things progress, they start to notice, like, their colleagues say things like, hey, you've changed and it's different. Certainly loved ones at home start to basically indicate that there's some changes, there's some issues, there's some things that aren't so good. It's hard to put your finger on it. It's hard to understand why this is happening to you. A lot of first responders still think that PTSD only applies to the military. And so they think, well, I'm not in Fallujah, I'm not in combat, I'm not invading Iraq. Like, why would I possibly have PTSD? And they don't realize that basically what's happened is their brain has not been able to process this call, and so it sits.
When we are hurting, we see these faces. When they hurt, they see this one. Clinician Tania specializes in counseling first responders. She pulls them out of their darkest moments when a combination of on and off the job stressors become too much.
But usually, by the time they ask for help, it's very hard for them to ask for help because the culture is, gut it out, just stay strong and sort of suck it up. And by the time usually they come in for counseling, it's really pretty rough on them. Things have declined significantly.
And I started to get really angry at home. Burst of anger. I didn't think anything of it. Again, I thought it was normal. And then finally one day my wife was said, enough, that you need to go get help. I thought that she was taking our children away to give me room to do the dishes or to breathe, but she wasn't. She was taking them to protect them when I got in these moods. So I knew then that what I thought was taken care of and was normal was absolutely not normal.
Almost kind of like this self-destructive kind of mentality, and I started to doubt whether I was even good at my job anymore, and started to doubt other things in my personal life, and those things weren't changing. I was still doing the same job. I still was married to the same woman. I still had the same child. It was me that needed help, and and that was when I really started to think about going and getting professional help.
I had not even realized how far out I was until one day I finally snapped to it and realized I was snapping at my kids, snapping at my wife. My wife and I were continuously fighting. My kids were upset. After the encouragement of some of my supervisors, our medical director, and my wife, I finally just broke down and had to make a phone call.
And then I'm at work one day and I'm going through my email. It was a couple weeks old, but there was a class that mental health awareness for first responders. And so I get home, I'm talking to my wife, I say, I kind of want to go to this. I think there's something wrong with me and I think I should go to this class. And she says, yeah, go. I'll call off sick if we need to. You need to go.
In the past 15 years, we have really done a lot of research on post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not this big unknown that it used to be. And our Vietnam veterans, we can thank wholeheartedly for teaching us a lot about it. We also have developed some of the best solutions we have ever had. And we know now how to mitigate PTSD, how to treat it, how to give people relief. My favorite technique happens to be something called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR.
I understood it, but it was still kind of, it seemed like a concept that was like, how could that even work? I got to thinking about it and I was like, well, I mean, I'm sure it works because people, it's a legitimate practice. Is it gonna work for me? I was like, I bet you that I'm gonna be the 1% or whatever that it doesn't work on, or the 2%. I don't know the statistics, but I was just being pessimistic, and I knew that going into it that I was gonna be that guy that it just didn't work on.
The biggest images that were in my head was seeing his body. And without going into such horrific detail of why, it just stuck with me in such a terrible way where I couldn't get out of my head. I couldn't sleep. Every time I thought of Chris, I thought of him in the coffin. And I did not want to think of him that way. That's when I learned about EMDR, and I thought, you know what? Like, I'm going to therapy, I'm doing all the right things. This has got to help.
You explaining about the processing it and not being able to get it put away, and how EMDR, you felt that I was a good candidate for EMDR, and scheduling an appointment for that. It's like, yeah, let's do it.
What we do in EMDR is we replicate the rapid eye movements that you do in your sleep cycle, which actually triggers your frontal lobe to open the synapses and process the trauma. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a starting point. And your starting point will be the worst moment of this event, that moment that just won't let you go.
And I was reluctant. I was like, okay, what is moving my eyes going to do for me? I was very reluctant. I was like, okay, like medicine is physical. I can understand that it's chemicals, therapy is one thing. So I was reluctant. I was like, okay, let's see if this is going to do. At that point, I was reluctant, but I wanted to do anything to feel better. So Tania explained to me what was happening, where I would focus on her fingers, and we were talking about things that were not easy to talk about.
What I want you to do is I want you to pull up that thing that you relived 1,000 times. And we're going to start there because once we process that, everything else is going to start to flow very quickly. So you just got to bear with me for the first couple of minutes, and then once we power through that, what happens is things start to get a lot smoother.
So I was focusing on that image, and I started following her fingers again, and the image disappeared, and I was able to focus on her fingers, and I didn't think about the image anymore. And we stopped that session, and she asked me how it went, and I explained it to her, and she said that we were just kind of getting warmed up.
And then as your brain starts to wander, I just want you to let it do that, okay? Just let it go where it goes. When I stop, I'll ask you to tell me where you went, right? So I'll just kind of have you describe what that was like. Okay. All right.
You don't think it's something that's gonna really work or what it's gonna actually do, but how it makes the thoughts go through your head makes you think of someone just putting a whole bunch of pictures and just flipping through them really fast. Your mind is just working at such a fast rate that it's just something I couldn't have imagined.
The science behind it, I'm sure it's there, but I'm just going to call it magic. I don't mean to undermine the people who do EMDR or the research that supports it. 3/4 of the way through EMDR, the questions about singular events begin to fade. And when you're going through those singular events that you're telling, the sounds start to come back. Names of people, my partners who I couldn't remember, started to come back when I was recounting these events. But about 3/4 of the way through, they tell you to stop. And they tell you to focus on their fingers and just have a blank page in their head. And they say, just let the memories go. Just think about whatever happens. And at that point, my mind just had like a download, and images started flooding and flooding and flooding. And it was the equivalent of the beginning of a Marvel's movie, when all those pages are turning really, really fast. You're seeing all those images. That's what my mind was doing.
So the technique of EMDR is designed to basically trigger your frontal lobe to open the synapses. And the way we do this is we mimic rapid eye movement that you do in your sleep cycle, which is when you process trauma from the last 48 hours, but you're awake and alert and you're in complete control. When we trigger the frontal lobe to open the synapses, what happens is your brain starts to process and download and move those images to your long-term memory. The difference between trauma is it stays in your frontal lobe and it triggers you all the time. When we push it to your long-term memory, it becomes a fading, distant memory. We all have bad memories, but bad memories don't trigger us all day long like traumas do.
And now it's a fuzzy. I can't remember a lot of things. I can talk about it and it does not bother me. And I haven't had really too many night terrors about it. I'm not as on the defense, but it is really a life changer, a saving grace. You know, we don't realize how many memories are up here and how much of a difference making it fuzzy can impact your life. And the fact that it went fuzzy has impacted me in so many ways that I can't even imagine, or I'm grateful for.
I remember just being fatigued leaving your office, driving home, passing out on the couch, taking a nap, and I woke up feeling great. No dream. I didn't wake up panicked or sweating or anything like that. I just woke up. I don't dream about them anymore. Their faces, the face and the back, they don't permeate my consciousness anymore. They don't wake me up at night anymore. It was a lifesaver for me. And I was able to not have to drink to get to sleep all of a sudden. And this was all a brief span of only a few months, 2 to 3, maybe 4 months at the most, but who knows what would have happened to me if I hadn't been able to admit to myself that there was a problem and get into you to help me. It was stunning how quickly something that seemed so innocuously simple as the EMDR, and just being able to talk to you, both those two things combined, helped me.
So with EMDR, we get those images to fade and people have relief. The nightmares stop, the intense reliving stops, and people are able to start to put their lives back together.
Although I didn't feel some of the same emotions, I felt better. I was still doubting whether it would work, or doubting whether it worked on me, and it was just so easy. It seemed too good to be true, and usually if something's too good to be true, it's not. And so I was starting to wonder if, whether were they just messing with me? Was I the placebo in the study of all these people? And I was talking to my wife about it, and she said, "Do you feel better?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Does it matter then?" And I was like, "God, you're smart." It doesn't. If I feel better, what does it matter if I got the sugar pill instead of the actual medication? But we're back to doing more stuff as a family, eating healthier, living the active lifestyles that we used to live. And that was always there. We were always able to do it. It was just a matter of wanting to.
Since going through EMDR and getting my treatment, I've been a lot happier. I'm sleeping better than I have since as long as I can remember, even before the military. My kids seem to be happier around me. They see that I'm more patient. I've noticed that I'm not as angry as I was before. My wife's happier. She tells me that she's seen a massive difference in me and a massive improvement. It's just made me feel better. I've got more of an open mind. I'm able to just enjoy every day a lot more.
You can't do what we do for a length of time and be exposed to the human suffering in amongst all the other stressors that go along with the job without it affecting you. And we can't fix ourselves. It's imperative that you find somebody that you can talk to. Somebody that understands. And it really has to be a professional, somebody that knows how to deal with it, somebody that understands what our lives are like and can help us through this stuff. Get to somebody that can help. It's the only way you're going to be able to come out of the end of this career whole.
The way I've implemented good care, and the tool and the secret has been, really no secret, but the tool has been good, effective care at no cost to employees with no paper trail. The first program I ever started to work with was an EMS agency here locally. As a matter of fact, from the interviews from Katie and from Nick and from Bob, it is their agency. This was the first. It was 1994. And I started to notice that those paramedics who worked for that system were walking into the emergency room. So I approached this agency and I said, hey, I think you have a problem. And going to counseling is not popular with first responders. They're not going to go. I understand you have an EAP, I understand you have health insurance, but with a potential paper trail and a diagnosis attached to their name, they're not going to use that. So what I proposed was that they put me on a contract and that they allow their paramedics and communication specialists to have unlimited access to me and to have unlimited sessions, and that I would invoice this agency once a month and I would send them a bill with hours and no names. And the director at the time said, you know, Tanya, I see this, I see the potential, I see the problem as well. He said, but there's no money right now. And so I told him, I will do this for free until you decide you need this. And every month I turned in my statistics. How many paramedics came in? How many communication specialists came in? How many EMTs came in? And each month I would just turn in my statistics to make a point. And I did all this therapy for free. And I didn't mind at all because I knew this was what was needed in public safety.
You know, the therapy in Tanya Glenn, my job didn't know. Because I was a veteran, I was able to get taken care of because I was like, okay, I don't want to go through my insurance. I don't want anybody to know because then I'm going to feel like I'm labeled and I can't do my job. But it was completely discreet. And I started getting better and works on improvement as well. So it's definitely, don't be ashamed, and asking for help is the bravest thing in the world.
Post EMDR, I'm 11 years into this profession. I'm not going anywhere. I love what I do. I believe that the help that I have sought out has prolonged my career and has made the remainder of it very happy, very rewarding. And I feel like I've been blessed because I've gotten a second chance, both at home and in this career field, by getting rid and becoming educated with fight or flight, PTSD, EMDR. So once you go through the process, you start to learn the symptoms. You know how you feel. You know when things are starting to go kind of stray, and you can stay on top of that. You could be proactive. So you really do extend the longevity of your police career and your family life. You owe it to yourself to come in and at least talk and see where you stand.
My hope is that this is going to take us further, that this is going to help first responders get help. My hope also is that we start to cultivate mental health professionals to work with this population. I think there's a lot of awareness and interest in veterans ever since the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think now is the time to start to bring up some clinicians who really truly want to do this. But let me tell you something. If you think you want to work with first responders, if you say you work with first responders, without a doubt, you better be riding along. You better be out there on those ambulances, in those patrol cars, in those fire trucks, up in communications under a headset, learning, knowing, and doing it. That is the most effective way to get in with this population. Because afterwards, they see you and they know that you've ridden out, and they know maybe you caught a really crazy call and all that good stuff, and they have respect for you. They also know that you know terminology and that they don't have to slow down and explain everything to you.
When I talk to people that aren't in the fire service and aren't in EMS and don't have any experience with anything along those lines, they don't get the full picture. They don't get the full story, the details of the calls, of what we do, what we see, what we experience. And I would imagine that some people, their first time talking to a counselor or a therapist that doesn't have any experience with first responders, they'll probably get that same modified version of what we do.
I can't tell you the amount of skepticism I face with every brand new patient. They're terrified to be here. They're terrified I'm going to do something like mess up their career. And they come in and a lot of them are very, very like, oh, hocus pocus, right? And I'm not so sure about this. I joke with Bob that he used to shoot me dirty looks because he thought I was some sort of voodoo queen, and it never impacted me. But let me tell you what, the day that Bob approached me at CE and he was choking back tears, the first thing I did is I put my arms around him and I told him whatever it is, it's gonna be okay. And that's the level of care and trust that we need to have with this population. Asking for help is so hard for law enforcement, fire, and EMS. And when you're there and you've been seen and you've been writing and you cuss a lot and you love to write out and you've built some thick skin, it matters. And it's really truly the best way with this population.
PTSD is not just going to go away by talking. Some action, some proactive step has to be taken. We could talk about the events, we could work our way through it, but you have to have somebody who sits across from you on that couch who not just empathizes, but understands. And they understand because they've been there. So when you sit down, feel them out. You have a first session, they're going to talk to you about who you are, your life experiences. Ask them the same way you try to get a family physician. Just make sure you feel comfortable with them, because that's the only way you're going to open up to them, and that's the only way you're going to get better.
It is worth it, and there's a lot of places that, want to help our law enforcement and veterans and the public servant. So find, number one, somebody that you feel comfortable with. Don't put up with someone you don't want to be with.
What I would tell any dispatcher that's struggling and is having trouble coming to work is to find somebody to talk to. Is really what it comes down to, be it a coworker or a therapist or a friend, somebody that you can trust, and someone that will have the understanding that you just need to talk. You don't necessarily need their feedback or their ideas or their opinions. You just need someone that will listen, because we listen to people so often. We need someone to do that for us.
The biggest thing was accepting help when you're trying to be strong. Being strong is also receiving help. That's not a weakness, and that doesn't mean that that you can't get through this, and that you will, and that it just takes one day at a time, then 1 month at a time, then 1 year at a time. However you need to do it, you just have to look at it as going forward. And so, as dark as today feels, there will always be light again.
Yeah, I'm not going to hide this. I'm going to talk about it, because if me going through this and being willing to talk about it can make somebody else be willing to admit that they need help, then it's worth it.
If we can save our first responders, we save their families, we save their patients, we save the public. Because when our first responders are resilient, when they're happy and healthy and their lives are balanced and good, they perform amazing, amazing feats. I have seen unbelievable events occur right in front of me that have saved human beings' lives. And I just have to tell you that I'm so, so in awe of you guys every single day. I absolutely adore you, I love you, and I thank you for what you do.
Started counting up the losses, weight sinking, water began to rise. Reaching in the darkness, I came here for an answer. Maybe it's time to surrender. I'm ready to fall. I'm leaving it all behind. I'm ready to fall. I've been holding in everything. I just wanna say the words out loud. I won't let it get the best of me. Gravity holds the key for me now. I'm ready to fall. I'm leaving it all behind. I'm ready to fall. All of these ghosts, I'm letting them go this time. So cut the line. I'm ready to fall.